Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Who's on the Ballot. Today we have several professors and doctors, instructors with us today that's going to talk to us on the topic Who's on the Ballot. We have Professor Tees, we have Dr. Raina, we have Dr. Martin, and we also have Professor Tabika. Thank you and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending today. I wanted to start with kind of briefly reminding everybody that we still have some time for you to register to vote. So as long as your registration is postmarked by October 5th, the county will still accept that. And so you can, I'll put in the chat here in a little bit, a link that takes you to the form where you can fill out a registration form. You still have to print it out and sign it and mail it back. So just make sure you do that. We don't have online registration like that in Texas yet. So this form will just kind of fill in the fields for you on the registration form, but you still need to print it out, sign it, and get that postmarked by October 5th. And then once you are registered to vote, you want to double check your registration. And you can do that at harrisvotes.com if you are living in Harris County or registered in Harris County. As an aside, we're going to be giving Harris County specific information today, but if you live in another county, say Fort Bend County, for example, you'll just need to find that information from the Fort Bend County website specifically. It's the same process, but you would just need to get that specific information from Fort Bend. So if you have any questions about another county, don't hesitate to ask. So you want to double check your registration. This goes for everybody, every election. And you can do that at the tax assessor's office, as well as there are links through the clerk's office. You can get started with that at harrisvotes.com. But the reason why I say double check your registration is you want to go into voting knowing that everything is going to be okay. And sometimes there could be questions about your address, your name. So if you've changed your name in any way, or if you've moved and you need to update your address, you need to take care of those changes before you vote. And you can take care of those changes through the tax assessor's office, or it's linked through harrisvotes.com also. Sometimes when you check your registration, you might have a little triangle, like a caution sign next to your name. Just go ahead and look at that, see what's written there. And if you need to call the county, you can, the clerk's office, you can. But it's often related to your address or something updated in the registrar's book. So you want to make sure that that's okay. And then once you're certain that your registration's all taken care of, the next step is really to begin to make your plan for voting. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Knowing kind of when and where you're going to vote, knowing for whom to vote, and the best way to inform yourself about that process. And so by the end of the day, what we'll make sure to compile and give out to everybody who's attended today is kind of know your plan for voting 101, kind of all the links we're mentioning here today, as well as the process for creating this voting plan. Once you've checked your registration and you're set to go with that, you can find a sample ballot at harrisvotes.com. Everybody's ballot is going to be different because it's dependent on where you live. And so you don't want to waste your time learning about electoral races you don't even vote in. So starting with your sample ballot is one of the easiest ways to limit the amount of work you need to do and the information you need to find out about. And so you want to make this as easy as possible on yourself. And you can go to harrisvotes.com, To find your sample ballot, you just type in your name and your address. You can download it and print it out. You can't use your phone while you're voting, but you can bring in paper, printed out paper stuff. And so what I do is I print out my sample ballot, and I look just for those races and decide for whom I want to vote, and I just circle who I'm going to vote for, and I bring that into the booth with me, and that's how fast I can, I can go in and out because I've already done that work ahead of time. So you can print out your sample ballot and make voting super, super fast. So what we'll do now is we first want to talk about how do you decide what you're interested in? What are your political interests? What policies do you prioritize right now in your life? Because knowing this information really precedes being able to decide for whom to vote. You need to know what you're interested in and what you care about. And so first we're going to have Professor Tobika talk with us a little bit about how do we figure out what our political interests are before we sit down and decide for whom to vote. Professor Trubika, are you able to unmute? Are we able to unmute him? Is that possible?
Okay. I
Yeah,
will
now
try to
we
unmute
can hear
my.
you. We
You
can
can
hear
hear
you
me now?
now, Professor.
Okay,
Yes,
good,
Professor
good,
Trubika.
good.
Thank you.
I'll try. I tried
Perfect.
to unmute myself. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me for this interesting panel. I'm here to talk a little bit about interests. I'll start off with one short story. My good friend lives in Australia, Sydney, Australia, and he always told me he never miss any election. I said that's so nice because I know he's never interested in politics. And I ask you, but do you know what your interest? Do you know who you're voting for? He said, no. There's like an interesting things. And he said, well, my interest is not to pay penalties because in Australia, if you don't vote, you have to pay penalties for not voting. It's like mandatory voting there. In Texas, we don't have mandatory voting, so we have to find better interest to vote. And I find interesting that talking to my students all the time, I try to talk to them to see what's their interest. And when we talk about interest, I think the first important thing is to discuss, to understand our role in society. For example, I'm a professor. I'm teaching assistant in high school. I have different roles. I'm a person with disability. So by understanding your own role in society, you should be able to define your own interest. Like for example, let's say you're a student, you're paying a tuition fee. And of course, I'm guessing that you should be interested in your tuition fee. So, how much you gonna pay for the tuition fee? So your interest should be to not to try to pay as little as possible, and your interest should be connected to your understanding, your knowledge, which institution is responsible for creating your tuition fee. So, so again, not only you should be able to find your interests, but you should be able to find institutions that have a power to make that decision that connects to your interests. I think it's important point to understand that each of us, each of us have a different roles in society and therefore probably have different interests. I would also say that interests are divided in two categories, or at least I divide those interests in two categories. I divided interest in your belief category or your ideas or your ideological segment. Do you believe in individualistic political culture? The government should not be intervening in economy. Or do you believe in moralistic political culture? The government should intervene in economy and help those needs. So at the end, you have to understand your own position in society and think what should be the best interest the government took in your case? So in that way, it's much easier to go to see. Veronica already explained, the professor Reina explained the ballot. How can you check your candidates? But once you know your interest, Now you have to be able to check position of those candidates. Do you share their interest? Are they share your interest? And I think very useful site is votesmart.org. Votesmart.org, actually, it's a site where you can go and you can type in any politician, any candidates on your ballot. Let's say my candidate is Al Green for District 9, or uh, Alma Allen in State House of Representatives in Texas. So all I need to do, just plug in the name of my candidates in that votesmart.org, and I can see her position. I can see his position on different issues. And again, be aware that we must be able to define our interest in our current interest in our society, but of course, be able to make priorities. I mean, I would like to have a lower tuition fee. I would like to have a better TRS. I mean, again, you have to make sure to understand what's your priority. I mean, we would like to have many different things, but as long as you can find one interest or two interests, then you have to go again to those candidates and compare your interest with their interest. VoteSmart.org, as you can see on the chat now, give you excellent tool where you actually can type down your own position on different issues. Let's say you can write down your position on legalization of marijuana. You write your position on budget in Texas. You write your own position with regards to taxes in Texas. And then what smart.org will do, it's gonna compare your position with candidate's position. And this ultimately website will give you the closest candidate you do have. And keep in mind one thing, there's no perfect match between your position and any candidate. What you have to do, it's to find the most closest candidate. Because, many people are saying, oh, this candidate is good, but it's not what I want. I need more. Well, there's no perfect life, there's no perfect politics, and there's no perfect candidates. You must calculate which is the closest candidates that match your interest in that sense. But again, I want to point that defining the interest is most important things. And also it seems to be easy thing to do. Sometimes we need time and actually knowledge to find it out. I have my students who often said that, oh, I want to join American Medical Association. So I'm asking them, okay, great. American Medical Association is great interest groups. So tell me why you want to join them. And some of them tell me, oh, American Medical Association is great interest group because they support good and affordable health care. Well, that's what they put on their website. But is that really what they do? You have to research on your own. American Medical Association is great interest groups if you become one day a doctor or nurse. But again, I encourage you not to think about future when you try to define your interest. I encourage you to think about your current interest right now. So that being said, when you try to define your interest, you try to stay in your current position. In your current position, and that's going to help you out to see what your interest is. When I'm thinking about interest, the second important thing is here is to be aware of institution. So let's say you are supporting tuition fee to be lower for your next semester, but you have to know which office, which institution is responsible for this for this position of your interest. Like you cannot knock on the door of city officials and see who city officials is more matching your interest, because city officials cannot make decisions in that regards. You have to research who does make those decisions. It's state of Texas. It's a federal government. It's maybe your own college does that. Actually, as a matter of fact, it does. Since 1980s, in Texas, colleges make those decisions. But again, state of Texas make them capable of doing that. So you better check your state representatives. I was actually quite shocked to find out that many people do not know who their candidates are in Texas House of Representatives. And please, when you go to your ballot, if Professor Reina don't mind, I will tell you, yes, you can go to Harris County to find the ballot that you have, but I found it very, very useful to go to Ballotpedia sample look ballot. In Ballotpedia sample ballot, doesn't matter where you live, in any county in Texas, as long as you put your address there, your address in that sample ballot, you're going to see your candidates. But again, finding your candidates, it's the first step. Seeing their position, it's another step, and understanding what they do, what state representative does, what he can do in regards to your interest. So so basically, again, you have to, number one, be able to see your current interest. Uh, as I said, we have multiple roles, and I hope you learned something from that for me. So I guess, Professor Ina, that's my 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Professor.
You're
So
welcome.
the next thing to think about once you have a better idea of kind of what you care about and what really affects your life is to begin looking for information about the candidate. So you're already knowing specifically who you're going to research because you've looked at your sample ballot and you already know kind of what you're concerned about and what your stances are about certain policies that affect your life. And so you want to begin finding candidate specific information. There's two ways you can go about doing this. One is to go to what I call kind of candidate specific or partisan information sources. And the other route is to go to nonpartisan information sources. So first we'll hear from Professor Tees that he'll talk to us about the different ways and routes that we can take to find candidate specific or party specific information. Professor Tees, take it away.
Thanks, Professor Reyna. Yes, one of the things that you'll find voting in Texas, and particularly in a county like Harris, is that there are so many candidates. And while most people, by the time they get to the polling place, they know who they're going to vote for president or for U.S. Senator, a lot of my students are dismayed when they realize that there's then 10 or 12 pages of judges that they don't know anything about. And the typical kind of sloppy way that Texans vote on that is they just decide, well, I'm feeling Republican today, I'm going to vote for all the Republicans, or I'm feeling Democratic today, I'm going to vote for all the Democrats. And that's how we get these wide swings on our ballot where a lot of good people get voted out for no real reason other than that they had the wrong letter next to their name. So as you're looking for ways to judge these different candidates, Professor Martin's going to talk about some of the nonpartisan, more unbiased ways to judge these. I wanted to mention a few ways that you can look at, the partisan or the more opinionated ways to look at this. First of all, look at what the candidates are telling you themselves. Just about every candidate for office has a website. In addition to their websites, many of them are on social media. They have Twitter accounts, they have Facebook pages. So you can look at these to find out what the candidates are telling you, what the candidates are telling each other. The other thing that I really like to look at is endorsements. Who are the groups that are endorsing these candidates, and what does that tell you? There are a lot of interest groups that have slates, and there's different types of them that you can look at depending on where your interests are. You can see what aligns best with the way you feel about politics and issues. There are business interest groups. Some of the ones that do slates in our area would be the Houston Realty Business Coalition, which is a group of real estate related groups. They have a slate of candidates that they endorse. Texans for Lawsuit Reform, which is a civil justice reform group. The Greater Houston Builders Association, the Houston Association of Realtors. There's a lot of business and industry groups that endorsed candidates, and many of them are very bipartisan. So that's definitely worth looking at. There are labor groups, the traditional labor groups, the AFL-CIO and the Teamsters, the trade union groups. They endorse candidates. You can look at their websites and see who they're endorsing. The Houston Police Officers Union is a labor union with maybe a little bit different view, particularly in light of recent events, about candidates. It's interesting to see who they're endorsing. There are cause groups, environmental groups, social justice groups, GLBT groups, liberal and conservative cause groups. You can look at their endorsements. And I think that that's a real useful way to sort of see who candidates are aligning themselves with. I think nothing really tells you more about candidates than who they bring along with them. Who are the groups that are endorsing them? Who are the groups that are supporting their candidacy? Who are the groups that are giving them money? So those are some recommendations that I would make. And then I'll turn it over to Professor Martin to talk about some of the more unbiased and nonpartisan sources of information.
Thanks, Professor Tees. Professor Martin?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So before I get into some of the nonpartisan sources of information, first, I just want to update you all on the back and forth with the straight ticket voting. It doesn't look like straight ticket voting will actually happen in Texas. This morning, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals blocked an earlier decision that you may have read about last Friday. So when you plan to vote, just assume that you won't have the straight ticket option. Now, if you're worried about standing in line, what I would suggest is vote early. The earlier you go, the more likely it is you'll walk right up. In the last 4 elections, I voted early, and I just walked straight in, voted, and walked out. I didn't have to stand in line. So also, Dr. Reyna talked about looking up a sample ballot and where you vote. I just checked Harris County's website, and it is really easy. If you're not sure where you're supposed to vote, all you have to do is type in your name, and it pops up. It has a section for your house number and your street. I just did mine, my first and last name, and it popped right up. So it's really easy. Dr. Reyna, do you want me to repost or recut and paste the websites in the chat box? I certainly can do that.
I can do that so you can keep talking, not a problem.
Okie doke. And I also looked it up for Fort Bend County. So it is also very easy. Just go to your county clerks, and or you could always just Google, where do I vote, sample ballot, your county name, and it will prompt you right to the website. Okay, so regarding some of the more nonpartisan resources out there for you, nonpartisan meaning no political affiliation, I'll give you 2 different approaches you can take. All right, so if you want to first know what your views on issues are, there's a great website that I'm sure some of you are familiar with called ProCon. Okay, procon.org. So I'll go ahead and cut and paste that in there. Procon.org will give you the ability to look up actual issues, and then you can go seek out what candidates agree with your position. Now, if you want to take it from another approach and you want to actually look at the candidates themselves and see what their issues are, there's a wonderful resource called the League of Women's Voters. It's in Texas, and I'll go ahead and cut and paste both the Texas website for the League of Women Voters in the chat box. And I will also cut and paste the PDF, their actual nonpartisan voting guide. So now, on the League of Women Voters website, the first link that I posted, you'll notice that there is an explanation of what some of the positions actually do. For example, most of you might not know what a railroad commissioner does. Well, you could just click on that little link there and you'll see a 2-minute video. Now, most of the executive branch officials in the state of Texas are not up for election next month. They'll be up for election in 2 years. But both of those website and that document that I just posted is a great guide to figure things out, to sort of help understand what each candidate's beliefs are and where they stand on certain issues. Okay, and regarding any other information, you could always just do a Google search on any nonpartisan resource, and you'll probably get a lot of information. One area that I like to turn to, okay, looking just for what's going on more in Texas, is the Texas Tribune. I rely on the Texas Tribune for multiple reasons. Some of the local newspapers here have a paywall. It's hard to get through that paywall. Now, some of them might allow for certain exceptions under, COVID. But what I always do is I get up to the minute updates with the Texas Tribune. Okay, so and as a matter of fact, that's where I read this morning about the Fifth Circuit blocking the straight ticket voting. So that's all I have. Is I could is open up for questions, or if we're going to just move on with the presentation.
Yeah, I think Ms. Rhodes, and Ms. Wilson, I think we're ready for any questions that people might have for us.
Thank you all very much. Those were very good points, and we're checking now to see any questions that have come in. But while we're waiting, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I heard about the mail-in ballots. What is your opinion about the mail-in ballots versus going into voting or doing the mail-in ballots?
Well, I think we're limited by the law at this point, and so Texas only has a limited definition of who's eligible for a mail-in ballot. So the majority of us will have to go in person to vote. And so that said, when you are going to go vote, after you figured out when and where you're going to go vote, um, you want to think about COVID safety for sure. So Harris County and all the counties are providing amazing measures for health safety, but we can also bring our own. So you are going, of course, you want to bring a mask. Some counties have gloves, but you might want to bring your own gloves, and of course maintain physical distancing. You go in with your sample ballot, you can go in and out super fast. So really, when we're looking at how most of us are going to vote, it's going to be in person in the polls. Harris County now has vote anywhere you need to or you can. So you can go to harrisvotes.com and look at the early voting locations, look at election day locations, and you're no longer limited to your originally assigned polling location. You can vote anywhere that's most convenient for you. So this is why we suggest looking at the website, because you can maybe go vote, running an errand, or it might be easier to go vote closer to work as opposed to where you live. And so you want to find the easiest, most convenient location to vote. And then you can also check wait time. So what's the closest place with the green light, where I know I'm not going to have to wait in line very long. When it comes to the mail-in ballots, like I said, the state's very strict in those parameters. If you requested a mail-in ballot and then you decided, oh, well, maybe I want to go vote in person, take that mail-in ballot with you to show the poll workers what's going on, because you don't want to double vote, because that's illegal. And they will have your name designated as somebody who received a mail-in ballot. So they need to demonstrate that you did not actually vote with that mail-in ballot. Professor Martin, Torbica, do you have anything else to add about mail-in ballots? That's all that's coming to mind right now.
Not in mail-in ballot, Dr. Reyna. I don't recall if you mentioned, but it is very important to make sure that you bring your state-issued identification when you go vote as well. Okay, that is key. If you have a passport.
I'm sorry, I'll put a link that shows those. So if you want to go through those options, that'd be great.
Yes, and just know, for anyone who has any concerns, I take COVID very seriously, and I have absolutely no qualms showing up to a polling location and voting. Most of the booths, it's not in a small little room. They're sizable rooms with sort of higher ceiling. It will not be difficult to social distance in those locations. So it will probably feel as comfortable as going to HEB to go get some groceries. So yeah, I wouldn't hesitate on that at all. Now, regarding just mail-in voting in general, because it's been quite a political issue, a lot of people don't know that I believe 5 states do mail-in voting, all mail-in voting. If I'm not mistaken, Oregon does, and Utah. Okay, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but Utah does mail-in voting. So the issue has been politicized, but being able to vote by mail in the United States is not a political issue. And the research that I've looked into it, voting by mail doesn't historically benefit one candidate over the other.
Okay,
or I should say one political party over the other.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions. What's the first day of early voting?
October 15th, I believe.
The 13th, October 13th. And we actually have extended. So this is the first time that we've had early voting this long before. So October 13th through October 30th. And for most of those days, it's 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. On the 27th through the 29th of October, those polls are actually going to be open till 10 p.m. So they're really making it very accessible for most people to go vote. Early voting is what I really recommend. As Dr. Martin already pointed out, you can go in and out. Often there's no wait time at all. And you also then provide some cushion in terms of time in case there are issues or concerns that come up. You can ask us questions. You can talk to the county if there's any questions. So you have some time before Election Day. Harris County is also experimenting with 24-hour polling places. So I believe on the map you can find this, but on October 29th, until that Friday morning, there will be a 24-hour option also. So Harris County is doing a lot for accessibility in terms of early voting locations.
And the only other thing that I wanted to add on to that, and I should have said this back when I talked about no straight ticket voting, I would encourage you to make up your mind before you get to the election whether you want to vote for one political party or not. So when you go in there, you can just simply choose the political party, because there will be a lot of races that you vote in. You vote for a lot of judges in Harris County. So if you want to only support one political party, whether it be the Republican Party or Democratic Party, if you know that going in, you can save yourself some time getting through the ballot.
That's a great idea.
The next question we have, thank you both. Early voting means I can vote at any polling place? That's the question. They're asking if they can vote at any polling place for early voting.
Correct. That is absolutely true. So you'll definitely want to go to that early voting map that's in the chat, that link, or harrisvotes.com. And you are able to see then the scope of Harris County and all the polling places. And again, look for that green wait line symbol, color symbol, because that will show you the locations that have the shortest wait time. And
Right.
they update it live, so it's a pretty accurate estimate of time.
Yeah. And you can vote as long as it's in the same county. So if you work in Fort Bend County, but you live in Harris County, it's the place where you live.
Next question we have. Thank you. That's good to know, because I know back in the day that you can only vote wherever they tell you to go, and to be able to vote in the same county is very good.
Right.
The next question we have, so if I temporarily live on one side of town and I don't have my permanent address to vote, what do I do?
What do you do? So you want to make sure your registration, that address is updated. So even if you have a temporary address, you're going to want to make sure that that is accurate. I know sometimes with college students, especially, whether or not you use your parent or your guardian's address versus your temporary address, or what in your mind is a temporary address, regardless, you're going to want to make sure that that address where you're currently living is up to date. And that's really easy to fix. We do have an online option for that. So earlier in the chat, I did put if you needed to update your name and your address. It's your call. If temporary is like a week or so, you're going to want to, just probably keep it at your permanent address. You do want to double check that the ID that you're using is up to date also. So you want to make sure that your ID's information matches your address and your name that the county has on file, because you might have some questions about that. Again, the purpose of the ID is to be able to link you and your identity to your ballot. And so you just want to make sure that that's all in alignment with one another, and all these things match. And again, if there's any questions that they have for you about that, you can always bring it or ask for a provisional ballot. And the idea about a provisional ballot is that everybody has this right to vote. And just because you go to vote and there might be some hiccups or something like that, doesn't mean you should be denied the right to vote. And so you can ask for a provisional ballot if they have questions about your ID or your address or something like that. As long as you know you're right and that you're registered to vote in Harris County, you can ask for a provisional ballot and vote. What this does is that you're able to vote, but they're going to hold it until you fix this question about address or your name or something like that. But it gives you time. And so the minute you cast your provisional ballot, then you need to make sure you work with the county to fix these problems or questions that they have. But you will not be denied that right to vote. So make sure that, kind of plan B or plan C is that you have a right to cast a provisional ballot.
Thank you. I think the question kind of follows behind it. Someone asks, why do people say it's illegal to ask for an ID when going to the polling location for verification? That's the question.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think it might be some mix up in kind of where in the voting ID debate you're talking about, but you have to have a state approved, county approved ID in order to go vote. So you're expected to demonstrate one of these forms of the IDs. The link that I put at harrisvotes.com for the IDs that are accepted, it's a great example. There's these color photos of the types of IDs that are accepted. So it's expected to be asked, what's your ID? So there's a list there of acceptable IDs. If you have any problems getting an ID, there are organizations, in a minute here, I'll put a link in the chat. There are organizations that help you obtain IDs. And so if you need help through that process, or if there are filing fees for the IDs that you're wanting to get to go vote, they can help you with that. But if you, of course, have any questions, you can always go to the harrisvotes.com or the county in which you live and their website that shows you the acceptable IDs to go vote for or with.
Thank you. Next question. Are there any third-party candidates on the ballot this year?
Yeah.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. Texas has both major party candidates and minor party candidates. So yes, there will be third-party candidates on the ballot. There's typically about 2 or 3 additional third-party candidates. Now, not every position is going to have a third-party candidate because there is no third-party candidate running for that position.
And what are some of those parties to look out for?
Well, let's see. The Libertarian Party will run judges. The Libertarian Party will also usually run a presidential candidate. The Green Party is another party that typically runs a presidential candidate. Also, the Reform Party does. I'm not exactly sure if there is a presidential candidate on the Reform Party. As a matter of fact, I could actually look it up real fast. I'm going to my sample ballot, and my sample ballot for President of the United States has the Libertarian and Green Party candidate only, plus a write-in candidate. And most of the top races also have a Libertarian and Green Party candidate as well. But more on down ballot, you'll typically not see a Libertarian and or a Green Party candidate for every position. And you also have a write-in option as well.
Thank you. Someone asks, where are we with the cannabinoids bill?
The cannabis?
Yes.
Cannabis?
Cannabis bill.
Okay. Cannabis has yet to be decriminalized in Texas. So there are two things to look for. When we talk about cannabis or marijuana, what you have is you have a decriminalization and legalization. Now, there was a bill submitted to decriminalize marijuana in the last legislative session, but that was blocked by the Senate. It will probably be submitted again in the 2021 legislative session. So if that is a issue that you are passionate about, that is something that I would follow. And immediately after the election, when we have new state legislatures elected, they will start submitting bills to for consideration. So, and Governor Abbott has said that he would sign a bill to decriminalize marijuana. It normally passes the House, but it tends to be blocked in the Texas Senate. So I don't know if there will be any different or movement in the Texas Senate on that this year, but we'll see.
And you can track Texas bills at the link that I just put up. So once that session gets started, you can look at bills by topic, and you can follow them according to whatever your interests are. But 2021 is when their next legislative session is for Texas.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight, even though Harris County has a diversion program for marijuana, it is still illegal in the state of Texas, and it's also illegal federally. So,
Thank you. We have a comment. It says, I feel like given the current investigation into, I guess, Representative Omar, that mail-in ballots are not a reliable or trustworthy method of voting.
Representative Omar being the same one from Michigan?
I'm not sure, it's not indicated.
I believe that's she's a member of the what is referred to as the squad, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't think she's from Michigan.
Minnesota.
But, you know, yeah, political science repeatedly shows that mail-in ballots are secure. So, you know, rest assured that if you have opted for that option, that that things will be okay. You can also follow up with the county just to make sure that you know, you're slated to receive it if you haven't already, that, you know, they have it down that you're supposed to receive it, and that it's been turned in. So there are measures that you can take to follow up if you do have concerns, but all in all, when we're looking at the history of mail-in ballots, it is secure.
And there are states that do exclusively mail-in ballots and haven't had problems with it.
Thank you. Next question. What is the best way to convince someone to go and exercise their right to vote?
That's a great question.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of tactics you could apply to their civic duty. You can talk about how I remember the first time that I voted. I got this rush of what I call "God Bless America" surge in myself, and of course it lasted until I got, you know, back on I-10, and then it went away. But nevertheless, you get a real sense of pride when voting. And if you really care about changes, you know, tell whomever you're trying to convince, if you really care about what happens in society, and if anything, COVID and the Black Lives Matter protests have taught us, is that all levels of government impact us. And I would even argue local levels of government probably impact you more intimately in your life than the federal government, for most people at least. That all levels of government engagement matters, voting matters. And if you think that how either the state of Texas or the county or the federal government is done a good job fighting this pandemic or a bad job, this is your opportunity to make changes.
Thank you. Next question. Are polling locations asking voters to wear a mask and social distance?
Yes. So the county is making sure that everyone will be safe, and the poll workers will have their personal protection equipment, as well as you should bring your own and help them enforce everybody's socially distancing. So the way the polling place will be laid out will be with the physical distancing protocols in mind. So the polling booths themselves will be distanced, as well as the interaction of people in line, and when you go and you get your code to go vote.
Thank you. Next question, and that it's the last question, and then we'll have a reference question. What is ballot harvesting?
Professor Martin, Professor Trabika?
Ballot harvesting is a term, if I'm not mistaken, is when someone will collect your vote by mail and deliver it for you. If I'm not mistaken, that's the term, what ballot harvesting is. And it became there's an issue because Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard submitted a bill in the House of Representatives to ban ballot harvesting. I believe it was a week and a half ago, thereabouts, or about 2 weeks ago. But yeah, ballot harvesting is this term that wouldn't really apply in Texas, but it's basically someone collects your vote by mail and delivers it for you.
And not all states allow this, so be mindful of that. And also, again, when we're looking at a lot of the politicization of vote by mail or mail-in ballots, overall, the process is safe and secure. And so you have to separate kind of the politicization of this process and anecdotal information, as opposed to what that aggregate data actually shows and tells us about the security of the process.
Thank you. One more question came in. Is it true that since we are really an all or nothing system, that a third party vote could actually hurt our chances of really changing what's happening in our world?
That's a great question. So it is often understood that third parties steal the votes from Republicans and Democrats. So libertarians steal votes from Republicans, and the Green voters for the Green Party steal votes from the Democrats. And there's a lot of assumptions that don't really hold up when we think that way, and that we often assume that, of course, someone who votes Libertarian or someone who votes Green would want to vote Republican and Democrat. So a lot of people who vote for third parties would not vote for Republicans and Democrats, which is why they're voting for the third parties, right? So a lot of it is there are assumptions that are made about people's political behaviors. But again, that doesn't prevent the Republicans and Democrats from doing their fair share to try to make it very difficult for third parties to do well. And there's a lot of negativity from the Democrats and Republicans about third parties because of their fear for that you're somehow splitting the vote by voting for a third party. Dr. Martin, Professor Trabika, did y'all want to add anything to that?
Well, to add to that question in particular, or to add to all of what we said?
To that one in particular.
I think you said all of it in that particular question.
Yeah.
And I would argue that voting is your right, and your choice is your choice. And if you show up and vote third party because you don't want to vote for either the main party, and someone let's put it this way, just to give you, I have voted third party in the past because I didn't like either candidates. Okay, and I remember I had a real visceral reaction because I knew that by voting third party, my vote would not go to one of the candidates. And at the time, I also lived in a state that really wasn't competitive. And my brother, who served in the Gulf, he's the one that made me feel comfortable. He said, did any of them two main candidates earn your vote? And I said, no. And he went, you're being just as patriotic voting third party as you would not voting. So don't let anyone tell you or criticize or downplay your choice. That is your civic right, and it is your choice.
And I think to finish with third parties, know that the outcomes for who votes Republican and who votes Democrat can also be explained just as much by who doesn't vote than who votes for third party. So often it's a misapplication of explanation. You can't blame everything on third party voters. There's just not enough of them. And so often the outcomes of elections are better explained by looking at who's not voting and the number of non-voters as well.
Thank you very much. If students have additional questions, where can they go at HCC?
Yeah, so you can, I'll put the email here. You can go to hcc.civicengage. And if you have any questions, you can email me there, or you could talk to your government professor or anybody in the government department if you have any questions that come up.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank you all. We want to thank our government department for answering our questions today. Some things that we did not know that's going to really help us during this time. I'd like to also let our viewers know that we have a voters pledge. If you the link is going to be in the chat in a few seconds, but if you go to our website and take the voters pledge, we're also sending out HCC vote shirts for those who take that pledge. Please, please, please do that. Please utilize all of the links that were put in the chat. They're very good resources. Some of the things that were talked about today, I even learned some things today. So definitely the sample ballot, I'm going to use that one. Go ahead and look at my choices before to kind of save me time. Again, thank you to our presenters. Thank you to our guests that came to watch, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you guys, and thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.